Good evening, everybody. My name is Ju. I'm a senior machine learning engineer at Spotify. And previously, I did my PhD in neuroscience. So this presentation is more about sharing my personal experience transitioning from academia into industry, particularly in data science. And hopefully we'll share some insight on my personal experience and also give you, if you are still in graduate school, let's say, hope my experience can enlighten you or inspire you when you think about your own career. And also I see some people in the audience are already working in the industry. So I also like to hear your experience in the discussion session to see what you think about data science and the future of this field. So this presentation, as I said, is my personal experience. And I'll probably spend about 30 minutes or so discussing, without any stop from beginning to the end. And then I'll open up the floor to anybody to ask questions or join the discussion. Okay, let's get started. And so this first slide is just to say data science is a very vaguely, well, it's been around for a decade or more, but it's still very vaguely defined. If you try to explain your work to your friends who are not in the field, they may just think about sci-fi or any evil artificial intelligence. And my parents who don't have a scientific background, they get their information from social media. So they will think about, chatbot. And then the society has a very huge hype over the past few years over reinforcement learning, such as the development of AlphaGo. And regular folks will think AI is going to take over the world because it can already beat human in Go. And if you're taking classes in school, what we usually learn is very complex neural net and all these mathematical equations, how to build very sophisticated neural network structure. And when I started my work, when I started my first job, I thought I would also be doing a lot of mathematics, matrix, calculus. It turns out I'm not doing any of this. Once I started to work, well, I do very little mathematics, some optimization, solving equations, but that's only a very small part of my work. And most of the time, my current role is I write code, not even in Python. I write most of my code these days in Java to deploy the machine learning models. So as you can see, there's a different, when you say the word data science, different people may think about different things. So just want to have this beginning to make sure, to make this a very open discussion when we say what is data science and what you want to, if you say, I want to become a data scientist, what that means. Let me see the next slide. A little bit about myself. I've been with Spotify for 2 years, exact 2 years. I joined pre-pandemic in 2019, so that's 2 years. And I have been working with the advertising team at Spotify. As Bill mentioned, I gave a presentation a couple of months ago with AI Camp on how Spotify, use machine learning to optimize our advertising. And so that's my current work. And this is my second job. My first job was with a smaller company called Tablet, which was also in New York in the advertising industry. And my previous title was data scientist. I'll talk more about what's machine learning engineering, what's data scientist later. And before that, before I joined Tablet, I was a student at Columbia, and my research was very experiment heavy. I was doing neuroscience, neurobiology, and I don't have to dissect rat myself, but I do use the neurons coming from baby rats and do imagings, drug treatment, all those very classical research method. So I did some people may say the transition from academia to data science, it's a sharp transition, but from my personal experience, I think the transition is not that like a dramatic transition. There's a lot of skills that you use during PhD that are very important for a position in data science. A small disclaimer is everything I talk about here is based on my personal experience, and also I will also share my views about the data science industry, which is also my personal opinions, and doesn't represent my employer, just to put it here. Let's see. Right, I see some audience are still students, either master or PhD students, which is very good because this is like the audience I would like to help the most if possible. So when I was a student, I did thought about different career paths. When I started my PhD, I still wanted to be a professor, as most students did. But then you realize, okay, academia was very competitive. There were not so much positions in the traditional STEM field. Also, there's like funding limitation, a lot of things. And the working hours can be very long if you are doing wet lab. So there are a lot of constraints. Also, I have to write a lot of funding, which is one thing that I didn't enjoy. So during the middle of my PhD, probably the third year, I started to think about, the non-academic career paths. And I almost explored all of things that are listed here. And by exploration, what I meant is I talk with people that used to be PhD and now working in these different fields to see how they did their transition and whether they enjoy their current work. For example, I know PhDs who were, let's say, in chemistry, and then they applied for law school and became a lawyer after many years in law school and huge student loan. And so by talking with different people, I have a glimpse of what it was like to be to now be in academia. Initially, I selected consulting, as most students did when they don't want to stay in academia. So I spent about 2 years preparing for consulting. If somebody in the audience has done the consulting preparation, like you have to do case study, you have to attend those case competition, and you have to pretend that you know this industry well. You have no experience working in that industry. So I did all of this, and I almost get myself ready to apply for a job in consulting. But before I actually did my application, I took some time reflecting on myself to say, okay, I don't really enjoy what the so-called consultant role, because I felt I was more comfortable if I actually have deep expertise or knowledge in the field before I can try to convey or try to persuade the clients of my problem solving skills. So I sort of gave up consulting after a few years preparation. And then around 2015, maybe end of 2015, early 2016, that was many years ago, I was a fourth year PhD and didn't know what I wanted to do. So that was the background of me doing the data science track. And my story is now unique. So when I was talking with my other friends who were either PhD or master students, they all had this very similar thought pattern. Like I thought I want to do this, but then I changed my mind. And now I have to make this decision all over again. I have to make another plan for my career. And this is totally fine. I think we shouldn't be too harsh on ourselves. Like you have to come up with the best plan on your first year in graduate school, or you have to select the very perfect career track first year all of school. Like in your first job, it has to be the best, perfect job. That's not how things usually turn out to be. And I realized this later as I keep on learning and growing in my own career is you just come up with a plan that works. It doesn't have to be the best plan. And you can always keep changing your plan details, both in school and in industry, like when you actually start to work, because we'll grow our knowledge. We'll also grow our different perspectives. You talk with different people. So I've been working for more than 3 years since I graduated from PhD. And I can say for sure that I'm a different person than what I was 3 years ago, because there are a lot of things had happened in my life, right? I worked in two different companies. I met different people, my coworkers, all different. So I learned a lot from them, which will change my perspective of the world. So I will make a different plan for my next step in my career. So just want to put it here that you can just come up with a plan that works. If it doesn't work, you can always change your plan. It's fine. So back to my personal story. After I gave up on consulting as a job application pass, I was a little bit lost because I thought I was ready to graduate maybe in 2 years to finish my PhD. but I want to have a job launched before I want to have a job offer before I graduated, because as an international student, you have to have your visa lined up in America before you can transition from a student visa to other things. So I went to the Career Education Center at Columbia. I'm sure a lot of schools have a career education center or career service, counseling service that give students, educate students about different career options and also help you identify your strengths and weaknesses. So I went to Columbia Career Education Center, and my career counselor gave me this personality test. So there are tons of different types of personality tests on the market. This one is the one that I was given. It's called MBTI personality indicator. Okay, I see something happening in the chat. So I'm not sure if you have heard of this. If not, you can just Google it, and there are a lot of free tests online, or you can get the paid version from your career education center or from the official website. It sort of look at each person from 4 different dimensions. That's why there are 4 letters, and 4 by 4 will be a 16 matrix, and it looks at it tries to ask you different multiple choice questions and to say, okay, what type of person you are most likely to fall into in this spectrum. So for example, I means introverted, E means extroverted. So it's a spectrum, right? Some people are more likely to be extroverted. And the second one is whether you are more you're more sensation, or you follow your intuition. That's why the I is an N. And T is thinking, whether you are more likely to use your logical thinking when you approach our issue, or F is feeling, or whether you're more relying on your personal, feeling or emotion. The last one is judgment versus perception. So it sort of break you down into different categories and try to say, okay, maybe you are more introverted, you're more sensation, you're more thinking and judgment. And within each category of these 16 different types, there are a list of recommended career paths, or I wasn't recommended. There are a list of career paths that people with this type of personality there are more this type of personality of people within this category. So like a recommendation, it's not a crystal ball, right? It's like a recommendation based on historical data, if you look at it from a historical perspective. And I did the test, and one of the recommended or career paths for my type of personality is software engineer. But I didn't know much about coding. I only used MATLAB in MATLAB to analyze my data. I have very little knowledge about computer science. I only took 1 course before in undergrad, which was mandatory for us, but that's pretty much it. And like, okay, should I start scratch as a computer science master? Because I know some of my PhD peer, some of them have quit their PhD and start over with a computer science master degree. So I thought about that for a while. And while I was thinking, I started to talk with PhDs who have not quit their PhD program, but also were in the field of coding. And that brings me to data science. So the first time I heard about data science was also around 2015, 2016, a couple of years ago, was from a person that I know. She was a neuroscience PhD from Harvard, and she did very well in her PhD academic research, but still she decided not to become a professor. And she joined the Facebook as a data scientist after she graduated. So I talked with her just to have a glimpse of what do you mean by data science? So I told her I didn't know much about coding, but so I was curious if she did a lot of coding as a data scientist at Facebook. So that was my first encounter with this word data science. And she basically showed me this very famous Venn diagram. As you can see, I got this from Google. It's 7 years ago. A lot of things has changed, but this Venn diagram is still valid. So she was telling me, okay, you need a lot of mathematics and statistics. So this part I was sort of covered based on my education in STEM. So I was good at that time in math and statistics. I know pretty little in computer science. And she said, yes, that's what you should spend more time focusing on. You either should take some online courses, or you take courses while you're still in school. So I started to take a computer science class at Columbia just to get the foundation built up. And there's intersections called machine learning. And I took, like most people who just get started with machine learning, I took the Coursera course by Andrew Nick on machine learning, and some courses on Udacity on machine learning. And I also started to read those textbooks that machine learning students read, like the element of statistical learning. So just to get myself, get all the knowledge ready before I before I consider data science as a career. As you can see, there's another circle here called domain knowledge, subject matter expertise. I wasn't so worried about that when I started to prepare a transition into data science, because unless I want to be a so-called data scientist in the biological field, then my background in neuroscience or biology would matter. Otherwise, this subject matter expertise will accumulate over time once you start to work. For example, if you work for Spotify, you accumulate a lot of knowledge in music industry or advertising industry. If you work for Amazon, you get a lot of knowledge in supply chain or in e-commerce. So at that time when I started, I was focusing mostly on the computer science circle with a little bit review on the basic math and statistics knowledge. So that's a Venn diagram. Let's see what's next. All right. I think I'm midway in my presentation. I'll probably speak faster a little bit. So what is a data scientist? And there are so many different answers. As I said, your view of data scientist can be very different from my view, or can be very different from your friend's view. And one good way of understanding what is data scientist is by looking at job description from internet. Let's say you search data scientist on Indeed or on LinkedIn Jobs, and you see those job descriptions, and they vary a lot. Here, I'm going to show you 3 different job descriptions, all with the title similar, like data scientist, machine learning engineer, all those stuff. So this is a job description for my previous company. The title is data scientist, and you can see the tools they're using are they want you to know something about basic coding, which is Python, SQL, Scala, and they want to know some basic machine learning frameworks, right? And then they want you to have some knowledge about the basic infrastructure, because a lot of things are moving to the cloud instead of happening on the local server in a distributed learning way. So they want you to have experience with that. And then in terms of the candidate qualification, it's better to have experience in real-time data than, let's say, you use data science in your research. That's a very different thing from, let's say, you apply data science with real-world data, such as the New York subway data or the Citibank data. And they want you to be good at communication, right? It's very important for every job. And so that's my previous company. And if you look at another company, well, by another company, I'm just saying like Spotify. So this one has a title of data scientist. And you can see the focus is less about the engineering aspect, like using Scala or Java or Python. It's more about explaining your results from, let's say you run an A/B test experimentation. You want to explain your result to the business people to make a business decision. So you need to have very strong analytical skills, right, and some of them will require you have some marketing experience. This really depends on the extra job. So as you can see, they both have the title of data scientist, but the qualification or the skills required are very different. And now coming to my current position, this is a job description for a position that is similar to what I'm doing, machine learning engineer. And again, the qualification again is very different. This one is focusing more on the implementation of a machine learning system and handling big data with different data processing frameworks. And right, it's very different. So when you look at the job description, you may be wondering, okay, what exactly is data scientist? Like, how should I prepare if I want to become a data scientist? Or if, let's say, if you are a software engineer working in a company and maybe you are thinking about, I don't know, you're curious about what your friend is doing as a data scientist, and you look at these different job descriptions, you will probably get lost because there are so many different types of data scientist. And they all requires a little bit different skills. There's some overlap, but still there are a lot of position specific skills that are unique for each position. Right. So in general, there are two big categories. When we say data scientists, there are two big categories. One are those people who do machine learning, and the other category is people who are more focused on the data insight and analytics. So when we say machine learning, this could be like, the title could be still called data scientist, or it could be called researcher, data science researcher, machine learning researcher. It could be called, machine learning engineer. There are different titles, but in general, it covers the end-to-end development of a machine learning model. For example, you want to build a recommendation system to recommend music on Spotify. It usually comes from a model development phase where you trial and you play with different models. You gather some offline data, you do some model training, validation. You run in a local environment. You could do this in a notebook setting. So that's model development. And after a model is developed on some offline data, then you want to put that model, you may want to train that model every day, right? Because if you have a model that's trained on the data coming from a year ago, the model will be so stale, so outdated, that's no longer fresh for your incoming data. So after you develop a model that looks good, like you build a neural net, or you build a very simple logistic regression that use some of the user demographic, it can use, let's say for music, you can look at the recent played music for each for a particular user. So the recent played music is a more like real-time data, because it keeps changing every time you call the model. That feature actually changed because the last played song is different every time. So that's very different, and that's the difference between a model development and training. Because when you train, you want to build a consistent, very reliable pipeline that always get the latest training data from your live data, and then train on that data to get your model that you will use eventually for online inference. So again, back to the music recommendation example, after you develop your model, you create a training pipeline, mostly likely in Scala or Java, or in Python if you prefer. And then you're going to serve that model. You're going to create a backend service that loads your model, and then it's going to read in your real-time data and then give you a recommendation. So that inference usually happens in real time and it has very low latency when you want to make a prediction. So this part is usually done by software engineer or machine learning engineer who have more knowledge in the backend service. So I would say this is more traditional backend service or software engineer roles. So that's model learning. So if you're interested in building models or developing models, building pipelines, machine learning is the area you may want to look into. The other one that I just mentioned is, how can I go back? Is data insight. Because nowadays, a lot of business decisions are not made by intuition. It's made by data. So it's data-driven business decision. Where do they get this data? Well, you can get this data just by looking at user logging. Like, do you want to know the monthly active user for Facebook or for Spotify, which will help you define your scope or help you, help you explain your situation to the investors. So with that, you need a lot of data scientists just to do reports and look at historical data, writing some SQL and create very important dashboards that are helping business decisions. So that's business insight. And also, if you are, let's say you're testing two different models, right? You can run A/B test online, and analyzing the A/B test result is also very important responsibility of data scientists. You have one model, let's say you have very deep neural net that give you higher accuracy, but it takes longer to infer because it's a very big neural net. And then you have another, let's say, logistic regression that's very fast, but the accuracy is slightly lower. In this case, which model are you going to choose? Right. So those are less technical, but more on the business side. And data scientists are serving as a bridge in between the technical aspect of models and the business decision. So if you are more interested in understanding the data itself, looking at the data, and also if you are more comfortable or passionate about presenting these results to other stakeholders, you may want to look at this one instead of the machine learning one. And I found this very insightful white paper when I was searching different AI career. So I put the link here. You can look it up later. And they are looking at, so each column here represent a different phase in a machine learning lifecycle. And each horizontal row is different positions. So there are some distinction in terms of what a data scientist do. So data scientists usually don't do the deployment. So they care less about the backend. And the backend is usually done by engineers. They can carry different title like machine learning engineer or software engineer. An analyst is more like a financial analyst or business analyst type of role. They do a lot of analytics, and they can do a little bit data engineering to get the data. And one thing I want to call out here is the AI infrastructure. And there is recent years, there is a new field called ML ops, so machine learning operations. They usually this is like positions only exist in big tech company who would invest a lot of engineering resource and time developing their own infrastructure. For example, Spotify has our own ML platform team that makes it much easier for any machine learning engineer to, let's say, develop a model and then serve that model online without worrying too much about the backend service by ourselves. So that is also another possible track for people who are interested in the data science field in general. Okay, 540. Right. In terms of specific skills, this is almost like skills. When I say I get these keywords from most of the job description to see like the more concrete skills, more like detailed skills you need, what I think you need to succeed as a data scientist. Of course, what type of data scientist? So this chart, this diagram again is from AI Career Pathway white paper. So I put more like specific knowledge in each category. I'm not going to go through this because you will have the recording later. You can look at the slide. But as you can see, you do need a lot of different types of skills, right? There will be technical skills like mathematics, algorithm, software development. There will be slightly more on the soft skill side in terms of how you communicate your result, either with your own team or with external teams. And right, so it's not like 100% accurate, this diagram for different positions, but it sort of it covers different type of skills you would need. Not all of them, like maybe you don't have to know the very details way of how ranking works unless you work in the ranking team. So it's not you don't have to have a thorough understanding of every single of them. I'm going to skip this. So this slide basically just to say different title, as we showed in the previous slide, have different skills. Like they need different levels of familiarity for different types of skills. All right, so we covered the technical aspect of it. And now I just want to spend one slide talking about the soft skills aspect of it. And that is communication. And it's more and more important as you get more and more senior in your career, especially industry. Yeah, so this, you can forget anything in this presentation, just remember this meme for communication. And I think this is my last slide, right? once you already start to work in industry, let's say me as a machine learning engineer, already in the third year of my career, and then so are some audiences. You already start to work, and the question we always keep asking ourselves is, for long term, do I still want to be a engineer as an individual contributor, and grow in that track, or do I want to be a manager that I can focus more on the managerial skills, project management or people management? So these are two different tracks that I keep thinking most of the time. And as I said, my thought could change, gradually as I get more exposure or experience in the field. So you probably don't have to make a decision now, or even I made a decision now, I can always change my mind. So there's always, back and forth. I see people went to manager track and then they realize they don't really enjoy it. So they came back as an IC, or some IC has, after they have been a staff engineer, like a very senior IC for many years, they may again decide to become a people manager. So you can always, feel free to switch between. IC is individual contributor, right? It's you coder. You can think as a person who does not have to manage a team. And I would recommend two books here that I have read, which I thought was very helpful. One is for the IC track. There's a website called Staff Engineer, and they also have a Kindle book. They interview different staff engineers from different companies to learn about how what their day-to-day life is and how they made the transition. On the manager track, there are a lot of books. I would say there are much more books on tech manager than tech staff engineer. But one book that I found very interesting, just to have an idea of what my manager was thinking, or how can I be a better employee, for that matter, is Radical Condor. It's a very good book. I would recommend. Okay, last but not the least, I have a personal, just like a little bit advertisement for myself. I have a YouTube channel that I wanted to upload many videos about, career transition for a PhD or some machine learning technical knowledge or tips. But as you can see, my last video is 5 months ago. So I've been slacking a little bit on making videos. But I hope I'll get better once I get more time. So that's it. And thank you very much. And I want to give much more time for the questions.
Great, thanks. So we're going to open up for the Q&A. Again, if you have questions, feel free to post into the chat. Or if you prefer to ask questions, feel free to raise your hand and we will unmute you. You can speak to ask questions. That's probably more easier. So we have a question in the chat, and then we have another one in the a few raise a hand. So maybe you can go with the first question in the chat, and then I will unmute the one in the raise a hand. You can go with the first question in the room in the chat. Oh, you are on mute. Sorry, go ahead. Still on mute? Still muted? Give me 1 second. Let me see what's going on. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I think you unmute the wrong person. I'm not the speaker.
Oh.
Our name are very similar.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, my apologies. So, hold on. Let me. Allow. Okay. Okay, hi Ju, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, cool.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries. Looking at which one, the first question, I think it's Anjun Ing's class, right? Which online learning did you pick? There's, I took a couple of years ago, I took the nano degree in data science from Udacity many years ago. I know they changed their business model. They also changed the content of their classes for Udacity. But back then, I took the nano degree, which I found was very helpful for me to have the overview of what data science was. And what other class? If you're interested in reinforcement learning, there is one YouTube playlist from the author of AlphaGo, which was very helpful. Do you, I'm gonna read the question from Nicholas Shant. Sorry if I speak your name incorrectly. Do you feel compelled to become a subject matter expert once working in the industry, or do you focus on data science engineering aspect? Do you feel compelled? It's more natural. I wouldn't say compelled. It just come naturally from learning on the job. Once you started to, work more on the business logic of how a certain algorithm works, you naturally become a subject matter expert by either working on the project or by talking with your project manager or product manager. So it happens naturally. Of course, at the same time, you can educate yourself if you're interested by Googling or by attending different conferences. So yeah, for your question, not compelled, but yes, you will become a subject matter expert. And you also focus on data science engineering aspect. That part is also happen naturally because you need to develop your technical skills. At least in the first few years, right? If you decide to become an IC, a senior engineer. So in order for you to transition into manager from an engineer, you have to be a senior engineer, at least in my company and above. So you have to have the technical background before you become a manager. So yes, you have to get some engineering development. From Grace Jacko in Australia, how did you tailor market yourself coming from a different field in your PhD? Tailor a market. I'm assuming you're talking about when you apply for a job, when you apply for your first job. So as a, I didn't really market myself I didn't try to make myself stand out like, oh, I'm different, I'm from PhD. I try to make myself useful, and it's probably too pragmatic. I try to make myself of value to the position that I'm applying to. Let's say if the position is looking for a particular skill and you have it, then good. And you can emphasize a little bit on your research skill, but only to a certain degree. Because let's say if the team already have PhDs, right? That's what happened on my first job and my current job. We already have a lot of PhDs on the team. So they already know, okay, this is what PhD or any people, mostly to your question, this is what a PhD is. Like, I know what it feels like to work with a PhD, or I know what is like, what PhD are thinking, because some of the thinking pattern we PhD have are not efficient in the industry setting. So I would say you just stay true to yourself. You don't have to spend extra energy, market yourself to emphasize your PhD. That's just my thought on this. So I hope that answers your question, because I basically said I didn't tailor my resume. Oh, right. One thing I can say is on your resume, my suggestion is in your resume, when you talk about your past experience, of course, you're going to include your PhD research experience because that's a very big part of your life. But I would also recommend to include a real world data experience. You can join a bootcamp, or you can do a data hackathon, or you can do a pro bono data science project. So anything that's outside your traditional academic background that's related to data. it will be very helpful. One, it will show that you made a very intentional choice of doing this, because for your PhD research, it's sort of what you're doing every day. It's not like extra energy you need to do data analysis for your PhD thesis. So by making a conscious choice of, okay, I'm going to look at this particular weather data, making up example in New York, and then I'm going to try to draw some dashboard, use Tableau to make a website out of it, so that when you showcase this project, you can show either to the interviewer or to the person who review your resume, okay, this person really make some effort in looking at this data science as a career, like very seriously as a career. So that's one thing that I think you can tailor yourself a little bit more with real-time data.
Okay, so I want to move to the question to the one already raised hand. I think they raised the hand quite for a long time. So let's go with the first one. Hey, Ben, you can unmute yourself to ask the questions. Okay, all right, let's move to the next one. Sean McDonough, you can, go ahead.
Hi there. First of all, great talk. Thank you for that. My question is about, I guess, the future of remote work and where you see that going. And obviously, this question would have had a very different answer 2 years ago. But do you see there being sort of an opening up of ML, data science, whatever you want to call it, jobs that sort of are suitable for the PhD level? That will not require you to be geographically there. I'm asking this as a person who's about a year out from finishing a PhD in statistics in a city with less employers than would be ideal in terms of the sort of, I guess, for lack of a better term, high-level research jobs that I'd like to do. So I've sort of got my ear to the ground for exciting opportunities that might be remote, and do you think more of those are going to come into existence given what we have experienced in the last 2 years?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Sean. It's changing, right? It keeps changing in different directions. When pandemic first started, a lot of companies did open up for a lot of remote positions. But now you see the trend sort of get reversed for some tech companies. So Spotify still allows us to work remotely. You can work from home. I choose to work from home for the foreseeable future. But I do see a lot of other tech companies are encouraging their employees to come back to the office. But there will be other tech companies that are okay with their employees working remotely or relocate to other part of the country or world. So I can't really predict for the future which direction the majority of the companies will be. But at least for now, if you are, did you say you're graduating like in 2 years?
About a year from now, it should be done, 2022.
Right. And then I'm assuming you will start to apply for jobs before you graduate. So that will be like 6 months from now. So I would say 6 months from now, there would still be a lot of remote positions. And right. And if you're in Canada, there will be also, if you are fine with relocate, there will be definitely more positions open up to you. But if you don't want to relocate, I predict at least in 6 months, there will still be a lot of positions that are open remotely that you can choose from. And I hope that answers your question.
It does,
it's very hard to predict.
Great, thank you. Thank you for
that. Bill, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Hey, next one is Kablan from New Zealand. You can go ahead to speak.
Sweet. Yeah, likewise, thank you so much for your time and the talk. I found a lot of this to be quite helpful. Something I would be quite interested to understand, especially from your experience, is you mentioned that you worked at smaller company, apologies if I mispronounce it, Tapad before Spotify. And so something I'd be curious about, especially since Spotify obviously is quite a larger company, is how different have you found the experiences between those two companies? Are there sort of aspects of it that you like, of either company, that you really enjoy, and are there things that are perhaps a bit kind of things you have to deal with?
Thanks for the question, Kabelan. Right. So I have experience in big and small company, but the data size is only one for each. So it's going to be a very biased observation from my experience. And I enjoy both companies, and they are very different. As you just mentioned, the bigger company tends to be more organized because usually big companies are there longer. So they have developed a more organized organizational structure, and they have more official documentation, for example. They have better training because they have more people. They have like a whole team designated to train, to onboard new hires. So from that perspective, the bigger company is more organized. And the smaller company tends to be more free form, especially if you join a company that is a startup, or it's more like it has a startup mindset type of company. They tend to move a little bit faster, and they tend to, try to trial and error more frequently. And they may not have that well documented tutorials or files for new hires. So if you join a small company, most likely, from my experience, I was paired with a more senior engineer who was basically serving as my mentor, and I learned most things from him in a one-on-one setting, rather than following, let's say, a pre-written documentation to onboard myself, which is what I did at Spotify. I read the tutorial to install everything and onboard myself. So they're very different. And in terms of daily work, then I don't find much difference. Like, you still work mostly in a small team. You work with people, 3 to 4 people, depending on your setting, on the project, and then you do, sprint planning. Everything else feels pretty much the same on a daily basis. But organizational wise, it's very different, and I enjoy both. And for now, I enjoy both. Right. How do I put it? Because the next question people may ask is, then why do you change your job? It's a lot of reasons why people change their job. And for me, I think it's to get a bigger scope of the advertising in general, because my previous job is focusing on a very specific part of the ad tech industry. Ad tech industry is a very huge industry. And Spotify advertising team has a more like broader like impact and in the whole advertising industry. So that's my personal choice of switching from a smaller company to a bigger company.
All right, so next question from Zafuddin. Sorry if I say your name incorrect, but go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bobo John. That's just my official or family name that I use. But thank you. Thank you for the talk, and thank you for the introductions. I was wondering, if I'm not wrong, you came to US with F1 visa, correct?
Yeah.
Do you mind? I think it would be interesting for everyone. Could you guide us on how did you move from F1 to, I assume you went to OPT and then to H1B? How that process worked out, and how did you find out that the company that you're trying to go will actually sponsor you in the future? How that thought process went in the beginning?
Right. So yeah, immigration related questions are very specific, and they're also legal questions that I can't give the best legal advice. So the whole process, you probably get better information from the International Student Office, because I see you are based in US. So that's my advice for if you want to get some information on that. So my personal experience is exactly what you said. So I was on a student visa, and I applied for OPT, which is also a standard practice if you want to, do some internship during school. and then you're going to transition into working visa, which is H-1B. So the whole process is pretty standard. And if you want to find out whether a potential company is offering H-1B, it's usually not listed in the job description. I don't think they're allowed to do that, not sure. But you can always ask that once you started the process. I feel like it's less practical, or it's less common that you ask before they even gave you an interview. It's during the application, you haven't even started the whole process. You already asked HR, do you offer H-1B visa or something? They don't usually respond. But once, let's say, your resume passed the resume screening and you're already talking with HR in person, right, over the phone, then that's when you could ask that question, so that if you have a very clear idea, they don't, then you can end your effort earlier, so you can start to focus on other companies as early as possible. So that's my advice for that.
If you don't mind, I was wondering, did you see any bias when it came to the university that you've studied? Do you think it's a better idea to transfer to a university with better name just to get opportunities in US at least?
I can't say I can answer that question. Because when you say put a name, there is like, that might happen during the resume screening or something like that, which I never screen resumes, so I don't really know. And when you say transfer, I mean, it's case by case. Some people are very strong in their work experience when they were in school, and maybe they do a lot of internships, so that also make them stand out.
Okay, and also, how do you see the demand in the next 3 years, 3 to 4 years?
Demand for which position?
To get the data science positions. Will this decline? Is it like a hype that we're living in now? What do you think?
It's hard to make predictions in general.
I see.
But if you just look at the job opening, when you search data science positions, there are a lot. The pure number, the sheer number is going up. But does this mean there's more demand for different levels? It's hard to say. Maybe there's more demand. Maybe there's more demand for experienced hire, but maybe the demand for new grad is probably the same. So the levels of experience also, you have to factor that in when you talk about demand for in data science field.
Okay,
Yeah,
great. So
it's just very hard to make predictions in general.
No,
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So thanks. Let's move on to next question. I see we have quite a lot. Dania, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. I think it was very useful presentation. It will be a little bit like a personal question. I mean, about myself, but I think it might apply to some of our folks here. So I'm doing my PhD, and then I'm trying to transition to these data science fields. My field is in physics right now, so I'm not an experimentalist. I'm like a theoretician. So it's like a pure mathematics. You don't like deal with any data, okay? And then when you are trying to, so I'm trying to do some extra projects. So like people, like I have friends who always tell me that you have to do some projects to show off your skills and stuff. But if I go and do projects that are not totally related to my field, like let's say some cliche project like a restaurant ranking or some crime rates of some city, I thought that would sound a little bit weird on my resume. Like you're saying, oh, I'm doing PhD in this kind of field. And then when people say, what kind of projects you have done, you say it like totally like the opposite side of the world. Is it okay to do those kind of projects, or do you still have to do some projects that are related to your field, but not necessarily linked to industry? Like, for example, I could do projects about Large Hadron Collider, but you know, it's again something that's not directly related to industry. I heard like several opinions. Some people say, no, go ahead, do like projects that are related to industry, even if it's not related to your field. Some people say do some projects that are related to your field so that when you write it in your resume, it will sound like you're very professional, like you have done your PhD in that field, and then you have done the projects in that field and so on. So what do you think about what kind of projects it's best to do?
I think if you come from a more theoretical physics background, I hear a lot of people are working in finance as a quantitative analyst.
Yeah, I'm also considering that, but
right.
I'm asking only about this data science stuff, like since you're expert in that field.
It's very similar. They also call themselves data scientists sometimes.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. It's in quant you also deal with data, but I guess you deal with more about the algorithm itself rather than the data ingestion and data output. Right. For quant, I think from experience, if they look at your resume, they care less about your real world experience. They care more about your professional experience as a physicist. They know you can build models. You are very strong in mathematics. So in data science, it's more. I still think it's more important to have real world data experience if you're applying for a data science related job. And again, when we say data scientist, maybe you're thinking more on the modeling side, or if you're thinking more about on the data insight side, which requires even more real world business experience. So which one are you currently thinking when you say data science?
I'm leaning towards more like a machine learning engineer or machine learning scientist or researcher stuff.
Right. Yeah. So there are researcher positions that is more like, I wouldn't say pure researcher, but they are more like researcher positions. Also, let's say at Spotify, their goal is not only to deploy a model, but also to develop new algorithms, which is very math intensive, and they write papers. So maybe those positions are more suitable for your experience and for your expertise.
But those positions are also very difficult to get in, right? It's not that easy.
Right. All of the positions are not easy to get in if you were talking about difficulty. Right. But it's about your interest. So if you have a particular goal, let's say you want to do this, and then you just build your resume or build experience for that goal, by talking with people to understand what it requires to get into that position if if you're really into that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add something here? I'm sorry, I'm interfering in the discussion.
Okay, so maybe quick questions. So we have quite a few in the chat, so we want to give them some opportunities.
Not a question, but in addition to the Daniel's question, so one of the other things that one of my advisors was talking about, he said that everyone knows data science, but maybe it's a good idea to specialize your field with data science. Let's say material discovery. You're very specialized in material discovery with data science. With that, put you in an advantageous place compared to your competitors. What do you think?
That field is probably to subject matter expertise that it was talking about. If possible, if you can find a position that allows you to take advantage of your PhD research expertise, while combining that with data scientists, then perfect, that's good. But if there are no such positions and you still need a job, I would say find a job first and then think about the expertise later.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to the questions in the chat. I see we have quite a few questions in the chat. Drew, are you able to see the questions in the chat, or I can just read to you? The one from Whitney. I think we stopped there before.
Yeah, I think this is related to the question that Bobo John was just asked. Like, can I use neuroscience or my previous research background in my current job? Very little. In terms of like the neuroscience specific thing that's directly related to my research, like I was doing synaptic plasticity theory in neuroscience, which you can claim that it inspired the development of neural net, all those weight calculation and matrix. But that's pretty much it. And that's how I feel about my, very specific research knowledge. However, there are a lot of things you do during PhD. Those who are PhD probably have similar feeling. You need to manage your own PhD project. You need to define the timeline for your experiment. You need to write a lot of papers and, proposals, especially proposals. And that writing, that communication skill, either written or verbal, will come very handy in your work. So specific neuroscience background, maybe very little, but the whole PhD background, yes, it's very helpful. I get a direct message from Amima. What challenges did you get with starting the DS journey, and would you do anything differently? Like skip graduate school apart from practice, what advice would you give one to improve their communication? Right. I wouldn't skip graduate school because as I just said, it's very useful. I still think it's a good investment based on my personal experience. It varies a lot by different people. So I wouldn't skip graduate school. However, when I started the DS journey, I would say one thing that I wish I knew when I started to work, because I think I did decently well when I was preparing for DS, and I was lucky to get the first job. But once I started to work, I realized it's very important to find a mentor, especially if you come from academic background, a mentor that has years of knowledge and experience working in industry. And if the best scenario is this person may also have a PhD. So they did their transition and they work in the field for many years. And I was lucky enough to have a couple of similar roles as mentors, and I learned so much from them. And I think it's better to keep those people as both your mentors and as your friends, as your, people who can help you and give you a lot of expertise. Okay, first thing is maybe you shouldn't spend so much time researching as a data scientist in the industry. Like you should start to get your hands dirty in implementation and do iteration from there instead of coming up with a perfect proposal for 3 months and then do nothing. So that's one thing I learned during work. In terms of communication skill, there are so many books. I'm not an expert in communication, improvement. And personally, I think one tip I would give to myself and also like to share with you guys is to communicate more. So coming from a East Asian Chinese background, we tend to hold ourselves a little bit back. So I also share this with my manager. My communication concerns is I tend to not speak up during meetings. Not that outspoken during meetings. Maybe I have a different opinions, but I prefer not to speak up and hold it to myself. And my manager told me, it's very important to share what you feel to the team so that everybody can, understand maybe from a different perspective, or at least for your own good. It's through trial and error. By speaking up, by speaking more, you will improve your communication gradually. So I hope that is a good advice.
So next question, I think, is from Naga. I think there are a few comments before that. So the question actually from the Naga, maybe you can just read it.
Naga, I have completed my master and a PGDM in DS, and also 2 years of work experience as a developer, despite having completed quality and quantity of projects. I still don't get interviews call. Every entry-level job posting nowadays is asking for DS-related work experience. Can you please let me know what is a workaround? So Naga, I don't know about like your other background, like what your resume look like. And I do see this a lot, like entry-level jobs are getting very competitive. It's more competitive over the past years, I would say, starting from 2015, it's getting more and more competitive. And they kind of want you to do everything. Like they want you to know about coding, they want you to know about SQL, Python, data algorithm, data structure. So without knowing much about your background, I'm just throwing up ideas, right? because you already have some working experience as a developer. If there's one like a detour of getting into data science, because if you already have experience as a developer, you can still continue to grow as a developer. I'm assuming it's like software developer or web developer, some engineering developer. So you can still grow as a developer and make yourself an expert in that field. And while you are working as a developer, not as a data scientist, while you're working as a developer, you can start to get some exposure to data science in your work, either in the same company, or you can volunteer to do data science related project work outside your job. So I would just say, based on your experience, and your work experience in particular, get the first job first, and then start from there, instead of going directly into data science, which is a very competitive field these days.
I think this one go direct to the next question. How long does it take you to get your first job, and any struggles? If you can read that questions.
Right, from June Lim. How long does it take to get the first job? And have you any advice for people coming from a different background, not computer science or mathematics? I didn't come from computer science or mathematics. So back in 2016, 17, I got my first job through an internship, which I found is a very good way for either PhD or master's, for any students who want to get their first data science job. Because as I said, the entry-level data scientist job, first, I think the total number is not growing if it's not shrinking. So it's probably about the same, the entry level. And then you have a lot of students coming from data science master programs or PhD wanted to go to data science. So there will be a lot of competition. And if you can get yourself into an internship, it doesn't have to be dream company internship, but it's better to be like real-time data science project that happened in a company, right? That will definitely help you a lot when you are actually applying for your full-time. So for your first job, I would say, if possible, get an internship. If not possible, if you can get an internship, there were, when I was applying, there were some very legit bootcamp programs back then. I'm not familiar with how the program is running now, but when you can check it up to see the reviews and see if it's still legit. But that will also give you some exposure to real world data science data and projects. And the struggle is, so I did have my internship lined up, but when I was applying, I applied for a lot of jobs for the full-time entry level. I only got 2 interviews for my first job. So I got a return offer for my internship, and then I got 2 other interviews. So it wasn't it wasn't a lot. And as soon as I secured the return offer, I just paused all my other interviews because it was just so stressful to go through the whole process. So I would say it's definitely a very stressful process, and it can be very frustrating if you keep getting rejected, or they don't even reject you, they just ignore your application. That happened to me so many times. But as your goal is to launch 1 job, that's it. You only need 1 job to break the door open, right? You just need 1 job. Same as what Naga was saying, like you just need 1 job. That job could be developer, it could be data scientist, it could be software engineer, whatever the job is that make you transition from a student to a employee. And starting from there, so many doors will be open to you, but you have to make the first step.
I think there is a saying that looking for a job is a full-time job.
Yeah, it's very it's not easy. Any job is not easy. I see this comment from Kurt, who has just left, because I was asked to make some predictions, which I can't because I have no data to make a reasonable or responsible prediction. So I'd rather not to make any. From Rosalind Xu, it's a direct message. If you encounter any problems getting a data science OPT from a degree in neuroscience or STEM, I personally have not. That's why I'm here. So it's related to your legal consultation that you should get advice from your immigration office. But I don't see people having similar problems from my observation. A lot of similar people with similar background from me, they have no issues of so-called transition. Because when we say transition, there are a lot of skills that you did, that I did during my PhD that I directly use it in my work, right? The data analysis, Python, I later started to use Python in my PhD, and I took computer science class. So there are a lot of things that the title may be neuroscience, but in terms of data related work, it's actually all there. So there are no problems with that. From Nicholas, some industries seem to be more focused on learning on the job, like apprenticeship, than requiring some prior level of expertise. Okay, so finance is one of those industries. I think so. Like quant is also those type of industries. They don't need you to have any prior level of financial knowledge. It's better for you to have some, but usually they care more about your quantitative analytical skills. Amima, I'm from Kenya, Africa, and studying in New Zealand and tend to not pick up of it. Okay, thank you. All right, I think I answered all of the questions.
Great, thanks a lot. As we are over time, is anybody have the last questions? We can take maybe the last one, if any.